My name is Alex. About 10 years ago, I was living in a fading industrial town in the Rust Belt. I had married my high school sweetheart, Emily, right after college. We were young, and I thought we were happy. I had just started a junior management position at the local automotive parts factory, the same factory where my father had worked as a floor supervisor for 30 years. My older brother, Greg, was the family's golden child. He was a former high school quarterback who never quite moved on from his glory days. He owned a dive bar that was constantly in the red, and my parents were always bailing him out. Despite my degree and stable job, I always felt like the runner-up in my parents' eyes, because Greg was the charismatic athlete, and I was just the quiet computer guy. The conflict started when I had to travel to Chicago for a week-long conference. While I was gone, Greg began planting seeds of doubt in Emily's mind. He showed her ambiguous text messages, which I later learned he had faked using an app, and claimed he saw me with a woman at a hotel bar. Emily wasn't with me, so she didn't have immediate proof that he was lying. She was insecure, and Greg played on that. When I came home, I didn't walk into an ambush, but an intervention. My parents and Emily were sitting in the living room. Greg had convinced them that I was living a double life. When I tried to show them my itinerary and receipts to prove I was at the conference alone, my father accused me of being a manipulator. The proof didn't matter. They wanted to believe Greg because he was the one who stayed close to home, while I was the one getting big ideas. The argument escalated. My father told me I was a disgrace. Emily, in tears and influenced by Greg, told me she needed space. Greg, looking smug, suggested I stay at a motel. Realizing that my own wife trusted my brother over me, I made a choice. I didn't sign papers on the spot, but I packed a bag and left. I filed for divorce a month later. I moved to the West Coast, cut contact, and threw myself into my work. Over the next decade, I joined a fintech startup as an early employee. I didn't buy a volcano lair or win billions in poker. We simply worked hard. The company went public, and I cashed out with a very significant sum. I'm not richer than God, but I have enough that I don't need to work again if I don't want to. Recently, my mother managed to get my new number through a distant cousin. She sounded desperate. She asked me to come home for a weekend, saying Dad's health wasn't great and they wanted to bury the hatchet. I was skeptical, but I went. When I arrived, the house looked run down. Inside, the dynamic was depressing. Emily was there. She looked tired. It turned out she and Greg had gotten together shortly after I left. They had 3 kids now, but they weren't married. Greg was sitting there looking bloated and smelling of alcohol. The apology was weak. My father mumbled that mistakes were made. Then came the pitch. Greg admitted casually that he had exaggerated the cheating story years ago because he was drunk and jealous, and everyone just laughed it off like it was a harmless prank. Then they dropped the bombshell. Greg was in legal trouble regarding the bar's finances, and the factory was laying people off. They wanted me to help out. Specifically, they hoped I would reconnect with Emily, who was clearly unhappy with Greg, and help support their children while using my tech money to pay off Greg's debts so he could start fresh. They actually thought I would step in to clean up the mess my brother made of my former life. I smiled, nodded, and told them I'd think about it. I checked into a hotel. I hired a forensic accountant and a private investigator. It didn't take much digging. Greg wasn't just bad with money, he was laundering cash through the bar for a local distribution ring. As for the factory, it was indeed failing. It was publicly traded and selling off assets. I didn't buy it to shut it down out of spite. I bought a controlling interest through an investment firm because the land was valuable. However, part of the restructuring plan involved clearing out redundant middle management. I returned to the house 2 days later. I sat them down. I told them I knew about the laundering. I told them I knew Greg had been stealing from them. Mom and Dad's retirement fund was empty, which the PI discovered. I'm not here to save you. I'm here to close the book. I informed my father that the factory had been acquired by my firm, and due to his poor performance reviews over the last 5 years, he was being let go as part of the restructuring. I then looked at Greg and told him that since his name was on the bar's illegal ledgers, and since I wasn't going to pay his debts, the authorities, who had already been tipped off by an anonymous source, would likely be visiting him soon. My mother started crying, asking how I could do this to family. My father looked pale. Emily just stared at the floor. I said, "You chose your family 10 years ago. You chose the liar because he was your favorite. Now you have to live with the reality of who he is." I walked out to my car. My fiancée, a brilliant attorney I met 3 years ago, was waiting in the passenger seat. She asked how it went. I said, "It's done." We drove away. I didn't destroy the town, and I didn't ruin innocent lives. I just stopped protecting my family from the consequences of their own actions. And honestly, that was enough.